Warhammer 40k Space Marine, a game I had little to no hope for when I heard of it for three reasons. Reason 1, this is a PS3 era game. Reason 2, this is a licensed game. And reason 3, Warhammer has previously had a few particularly shitty licensed shooters. When I saw this game, I was expecting a brown and grey third-person cover shooter with PS3-era graphics and gameplay so generic that with a little bit of texture swapping it could become Call of Duty, Battlefield or Gears of War. Boy was I wrong. Well, I wasn't too wrong. Most of the colour scheme is so brown and grey you'd come to believe colour doesn't exist if you didn't play a character that could be mistaken for a gold-clad smurf if you don't set a high enough resolution. Though the game doesn't only give you brown and grey, there's also some muted red and a fair bit of muted green, which is actually a pretty good indicator of where to shoot. If it's red, it explodes or breaks. If it's green, it's an orc and you need to shoot it. Though, using the fact that I mentioned orcs as a way to transition into talking about the story can go one of two ways. If you like Warhammer and have any clue about the lore, it's actually pretty good. If you don't, it's a story about three guys in power armor and a lot of disposable soldiers running around protecting a magical glowing pill of mass destruction, before accidentally causing a demon invasion which you then use said magical glowing pill to stop. Thankfully, my fears about the gameplay were quite far from the truth. In actuality, instead of playing like a Pop-Out and Pop Skulls cover shooter, it plays like a third-person budget Doom game, being based around three core mechanics: shooting, meleeing, and executing. Shooting works just as you'd expect. Look at a guy and click for kills. Melee works interestingly as it's kind of like a fighting game in that you have a bunch of different combo options, allowing for heavier and heavier attacks as you go up the hit chain. The executions, however, besides feeling as out of place as a pink raccoon in a fancy restaurant, are actually extremely cool as a feature. The executions are awesome because they adopt the Doom system of executing enemies, making your health bar refill like you just fell into a crate of stim packs. The executions also make one other surprising parallel to falling into a crate of stim packs, that being that you're not invulnerable while executing. Which would be fine if, like in Doom, the executions took about half a nanosecond, but they don't. Some of the executions feel extremely long and drawn out, kind of like my humour. The melee combat leading up to the executions feels awesome. During the melee combat, you can do attack combos, including stun combos. The stun combos allow you to execute, but more importantly than that, you can use the Fury mechanic. When you unlock it, Fury doesn't last that long, but what it does do is multiply your melee damage by every other variable the game has to hand, and make you regenerate health like you just hot glued a health charger to your chest. You then upgrade it over time by finding more purity seals. The only actually important unlock besides more time is Marksman mode. In Marksman mode, you can aim down sights to slow time, which is cool but kinda redundant in most situations, considering your gun doesn't fire any faster, and you're still about as accurate as the marketing for an MLM scheme. What makes this worse is that the Fury still drains at the same rate even when time is slowed, making it so that you run out faster. One thing that I do like that's ripped straight out of the Warhammer 40k lore is the massive selection of weapons. You've got things like a Tech 9, a submachine gun with extended barrel and scope that they pretend is a sniper rifle, an actual sniper rifle that acts like a tank cannon, a machine gun that might as well be a minigun, a gun that is basically a sniper rifle multiplied by a minigun, an electrified sledgehammer on steroids, and a sticky bomb launcher from TF2, among others. The weapon inventory is also pretty great. It's not the standard 2-weapon system that originated in Halo. In fact, you get 5 weapons. That's right, Master Chief can't even carry half as many weapons as a gold-plated smurf. Those 5 weapons are 1 melee weapon, 1 pistol, a bolter, and your choice of 2 other weapons. And then you can also sometimes pick up limited use heavy weapons that only have so much ammo but don't take up a slot. Though with such a vast array of weapons, you need something to shoot them at, and for that there are quite a few enemy types. You start the game fighting orcs, which are basically green-skinned primitive humans with weapons that really shouldn't work, but somehow they do, so you have to kick their asses hard enough that their brains compute that they should be dead, at which point they generally tend to drop dead, though not always. Later on in the game, after you accidentally cause a demon invasion, you also get to fight demons and, well, yourself, but dressed like an edgy 12-year-old. The evil Space Marines seem to have more health than your literally invulnerable teammates sometimes, at which point I hit fuck it and hot glue 3 sticky bombs to their faces, at which point I detonate them halfway to the moon. Other than that, you've got weak guys with guns which die in 1 or 2 shots from just about any weapon, and stronger red guys with swords who can fucking teleport because, well, reasons. Changing the topic, roughly once in every 3 blue and white with pink polka dot moons you find a jump pack, which is basically a jetpack that allows you to fly around like a pissed off kangaroo with a hammer and pound things into the floor. These sections stand out, seeing as even on hard mode you feel like a god raining down man-sized mortar shells on your enemies and then beating them into a slightly greyish pulp. Speaking of flying around, this game's vehicle sections don't have you piloting the vehicle. Instead, you take over the vehicle's weapons and defend it from the inside, which is an interesting spin on the gameplay, if a little annoying sometimes. Though, since I'm thanking the developers for not making me fly a plane, I'm going to bring up the controls. This game is clunky, but in a good way. You feel bulky and slow, which makes sense since you're in a suit of impractically large smurf armor, though it does get annoying sometimes when you're trying to hide from the small military of enemies waiting for you to poke your head out. You also can't crouch or jump, which is annoying, but it's really neither here nor there until you try to hide behind something, at which point you realise chest-high walls are about as useful as a cast-iron parachute, since the enemies are effectively aimbots. Now that I think about it, that might be where all the stormtroopers that could actually aim went. Though this isn't a chest-high wall safari, there are some face-high walls you can stare into while waiting for your shields to regenerate. Although that only takes half a century when random enemies are lobbing a variety of less than interesting explosives in your general direction. Explosives also have a tendency of hitting you through things sometimes, since I remember watching a grenade hit my cover, drop behind it away from me, and then blow me out of cover. Through my cover? I really don't know, but that grenade hit me from behind a box. I mean, it's one thing for grenades to knock you about a bit, but through a wall, while I'm wearing a suit that probably weighs somewhere in the region of 1 metric fuck-ton, makes about as much physical sense as going Doom Guy on some poor fucker's ass reloading my health bar as if he was made entirely out of bandages and Mars bars. Changing the topic yet again like a political campaigner who just got asked an uncomfortable question, let's talk about this game's 2 boss fights, why one of them is really good and the other is really fucking bad. The first boss you fight is the Orc war boss Grimskull, a giant orc with a lot of mates, an arm-mounted machine gun and a set of very well telegraphed attacks. The fight against Grimskull has a few phases. The 3 I remember the most are the first, second and last. The first stage has you going one-on-one with him, allowing you to learn his attack patterns and moveset. Then the second stage introduces his backup, which is all melee enemies. And then the final phase has him jump up on top of a perch and shoot down at you while his backup beats down on you, which leads to you executing him when he falls off. This is really good because all the attacks are predictable, you know exactly what he's going to do, and you can dodge just about everything. There is no bullshit involved. The second boss fight is Nemeroth, and fighting him is like trying to fight off the entire United States military with a Nerf gun and a pair of slightly sweaty boxing gloves. You have to take on 3 waves of enemies. A wave of melee enemies, which are pretty easy to beat, a wave of shooty enemies who surround you, and then a wave of mixed enemies. The third wave shows off some truly horrible design in that the ranged enemies pin you to cover, but then the highly mobile teleporting melee enemies force you back out into the open, leaving no obvious strategy of how to beat them. After bashing my head against a wall and nearly smashing my keyboard, I did finally win. I did it by rolling between covers like Sonic the Hedgehog, trying not to get tranquilized while shooting enemies in the brief pauses between throwing myself across the room to avoid getting stabbed. The boss fight then ends with what is effectively a slightly glorified quick-time event like all good shoot-em-up boss fights should. If I haven't made it obvious enough yet, the first boss was a fun challenge and the second a mind-bendingly annoying slog that really ruined the experience as a whole. The first boss fight was good, it made use of the game's mechanics and felt fair. The second didn't, followed by a fucking quick-time event. The only explanation I have for this is that they had 2 people designing boss fights. Let's call them id Software and Activision. id Software designed a good boss fight that made use of the game's mechanics and gave the player a fair challenge, which then got it put into the game. Activision, on the other hand, distracted his boss by offering him LSD and then replaced the final boss fight with what is effectively a level from a Call of Duty game. id Software then quit his job to go piss about with the Doom franchise instead of dealing with Activision's shit. You know what? Fuck it. Instead of ranting about the final boss, I'm just going to conclude this video before I drop dead from a brain aneurysm. Overall, I quite enjoyed Warhammer 40k Space Marine. The gunplay is solid and noisy, the melee is brutally enjoyable and very practical, and the executions are brutal enough to be outtakes from a Doom game. Would I recommend this game? Well, yes, but no. If you find it for like $5, you're gonna have enough fun beating the shit out of enemies with a variety of hilariously over-the-top weapons to make the purchase well worth it. But at its full price of £20 British on Steam, it's a bit overpriced in my opinion. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and punch that bell icon to see more from me. I have been your host, Vert343, signing off. Peace out, gentlemen.